Boys, I want to talk about Territory Wars. Now, I don't think Territory Wars is particularly the best game mode in the game. And I'm not saying this because I'm bad at Territory Wars. This is our most recent Territory War. Our guild has like a 99% win rate in Territory Wars. We almost never lose, and we absolutely dominate in Territory Wars. But I just don't think it's that fun. It's not nearly as fun as GAC, and I think that it could be one of the best game modes in Territory Wars. So in this video, I'm going to go through three kind of distinct ways I think we can improve Territory Wars. But before we do that, I want to talk about why even improve Territory Wars. And the reason I think it's important is, from CG's point of view, is to generate more revenue. If you think about the difference in characters that people whale on, a lot more people whale on the characters that have GAC Omicrons. We looked at this data on stream, but almost double the people went and invested in Night Trooper over Death Trooper Peridia because Night Trooper had a GAC Omicron. And I know you could probably point to a lot of things as to the reason why people went for one over the other, but I think those two characters are very comparable, and even it might favor the Territory War argument some, because Death Trooper Peridia, his Omicron in Territory Wars, I think, is better than Night Troopers is in GAC. And so I think a lot of people went for that just because of the fact that Night Trooper has a Territory War, does not have a Territory War Omicron, and has a GAC Omicron. And so from a business point of view, it makes a lot of sense for CG to have multiple game modes where people are enticed to want to whale. The second reason is because the more people enjoy your game, the more time they're going to spend in it. And if there's another game mode where people need to gear up certain tunes, it helps with that. It helps with not wasting investment into teams. Certain teams, they perform a lot better in Territory Wars over GAC. And so you don't feel like you're wasting something when your guild says, like, hey, I'd like people to invest in a Poggle Omicron or a Droidica Omicron. You don't feel like that's as much of a waste when you actually enjoy Territory Wars and have fun with it. Now, I'm not going to show you our defense because no spoilers. But I can show you a little bit of our offense here, and we can see that, like, Territory Wars right now is a very linear game mode. And so that's why my first idea into fixing Territory Wars is improving the map and the flow. And so what I want to talk about here is, when we look at these maps, it's the same map we've had since Territory launched. And it's just very linear, right? I mean, you go from one zone to the next zone. It does open up to two zones here, but then two zones, and then each one of those two zones goes to one. And while that's nothing wrong with that on the surface, it's very stale after doing this for so long. So what I would propose is actually doing something similar to what we do in Rise of the Empire, where we have different paths that we can take and that branch out to different areas. And this is not the best example because it's only 3 paths and each path is very linear, but some of these paths have like the special planets that you can go off and do, and some different options for these different paths. Now, what I would like to see is actually a much more interconnected web where there's multiple ways to get to the back zones. You don't have to clear every single zone to get to it. So things that branch off more. And so maybe you have 3 zones to start with, and each of those 3 zones splits into like 6 zones, and then each one of those 6 zones has an option, and maybe they overlap sometimes, so you can get to like a shared zone here between these 2 paths, and basically just make it more complicated for the path. Now, what that would obviously mean for Territory Wars is that we can't have the same number of teams in each zone, which is totally fine. We don't need to have 28 teams in each zone or 30 teams or whatever in each zone. You can reduce the number down to like 10 teams per zone or something, and then triple the number of zones. I think that would be much more rewarding, and even from a psychological point of view, right? People get instant gratification, and so when you're able to clear zones more quickly, you are more excited about doing it. I also think with this, you probably need to extend the time frame for Territory Wars. So maybe you do 1 day of defense and 2 days for attack. I would be fine with that. I know a lot of people don't want to have more Territory Wars, but trust me, like, if we can actually make it enjoyable, I think we'd love to have more time to be able to do it. The second thing about expanding the map is I think it'd be fun to switch up the map every once in a while. So those branches that I was talking about, they don't just stay the same. So it's not just like you have this map and it's the one branch here and it stays that way. But like maybe every few months or every quarter or whatever, we switch up the paths that you can take, the number of zones that we have, the amount of characters in each one of those zones, and then also each zone doesn't need to be the same. You could have like heavy zones at the front that require like 20 teams, and then the two zones behind that only have 10 teams. And so it gives you a little more strategy of like, okay, well, since we have to fill 15 teams here, do we want to make these 10-team zones really beefy so that way people can't get through those? And I think it would bring a little more strategy into it. I also think that the conquering zones, I think that should be varying. It shouldn't just be the back zone has the highest, but I think that like certain zones should be priority zones and that you have to go get in order to get the maximum number of points. With that as well, I'm not 100% sold on the city, I'll preface this, but I think it could be fun to have seasonal buffs go to certain factions or certain zones. So like if we do it Rise of the Empire, where we have planets, like Dathomir could be a planet, and Night Sisters could have a bonus if they're placed on that planet or used to attack on that planet. Or Separatist droids. Oh, and we just cleared another zone. Separatist droids could be used as another option to like buff those in that zone. Or, I don't know, if you have like Coruscant as a planet, maybe Jedi get a buff because the Jedi Temple is on Coruscant. I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but I think that'd be fun to have not massive buffs, but small buffs for different types of characters in each zone. That's going to be hard to balance, and that's why I say I don't know if I'm 100% sold on it. But I think that with Datacrons, it could definitely be a challenge to balance, but I think it's something fun that we could play with at least. Also, if there's more zones, more options, you don't get as many situations like this where one team is holding this guild from attacking us. You're able to kind of work around those and maybe still hit zones that you wouldn't have been able to hit otherwise if they just place one team that you can't beat. This is especially applicable for my free-to-play guild, where we get placed against one Galactic Legend on the enemy guild and we're screwed. And so that kind of brings me into my second point of the ways to improve Territory Wars, which is fix the matchmaking. And we went through a lot of this on stream, but let me pull up another paint file and we'll go through it because I think that's the best way to explain this. So I went through this on stream, but I drew up a little drawing here and I'm going to go through it again just to kind of iterate my point a little bit better since I've talked through it once. So they need to make matchmaking representative of the guild's distribution of galactic power. And I know we don't love galactic power matchmaking, but I think this makes a lot more sense in guilds than it does with GAC. And the reason is because when you have 50 people, you can take averages of that and look at how that distribution works out to pair people against each other. So let me give you an extreme example of why the current just kind of match people based off of just GP doesn't work and what I'm proposing instead. So let's say you have a guild where you have 20 people that are right here around the 12 million GP, right? And then you have 10 people that are around this 6 million, and then you have another 20 people that are like closer to 1 million. And this is an extreme example, and you don't have a lot of guilds like this. So this is what your chart kind of looks like if you plotted out the distribution of people. And what you'll say is, well, the average GP of this guild is 6 million. So we're going to place this guild against another one that has an average GP of 6 million. Well, let's look at another guild that has an average GP of 6 million, where they have 50 people that are all 6 million GP. How do you think those 6 million people are going to fare against the 20 people that are at the 12 million? I would say the 12 million are going to have stronger teams, newest characters, better datacrons, better mods, and likely you're going to run into a very similar situation to what the guild we're facing right now ran into, where one team stops you from going anywhere. Now, let's take a look at a very different example that kind of happens to my free-to-play guild. So what happens for our free-to-play guild is our guild looks something like this. Almost everybody is at the 1 million GP, maybe 1.7, 2 million maybe, but right in this range, we're all right around here. We get placed against guilds that look something like this, where they have just a couple of people that are up here, but most of their people are down here. And so what happens is they say, okay, well, your averages are right around here, around 2 million or so, and so you're roughly the same. Well, the problem is that the 2 or 3 people up here have like 6 GLs, and our guild has 0 GLs. I don't know how to draw GLs. And And so what happens is they place literally one GL in the top, one GL in the bottom. They full clear us because we don't have any GLs, and we lose every time. Like the last 5 territory wars, I think 4 of them have been like this, where we get placed against one GL and we just lose. There's nothing we can do. We place a bunch of Omicron Geos, a bunch of just Omicron Becks and Droidicas and whatever we have that we've been working on. We are somewhat of a territory war focused guild. It does not matter because they have one GL. Or 2 GLs. And we have no option. We can't just go around those zones. So this comes back to my point of, 1, fix the maps. So that way you can move around zones. So that way one zone can't stop you from not being able to do anything. So there should be ways to kind of attack it from different angles. More zones at the front. So maybe not even 3. I think I said that originally. Maybe 4 or 5 zones at the front, and you have to work around. And if you open up a zone from the back, you can still come at it from another angle and attack it. So that way you're not just be able to place one team and hard stop people. Now, obviously they could still, in this case, place all 6 of their GLs on defense and just stop us anyways. But if you fix the matchmaking, you can also fix this. So this should be the primary way that you match people, and then have a secondary filter on that. So your idea is get people whose graph looks similar, basically. Their distribution is similar. In statistics, we look at what their mean is as well as what their standard deviation is. And all that means, for those that didn't pass high school statistics or just forgot about it, no shame in that, basically looking at how much their different GPs vary from that mean, that average. So this guild would have a very high standard deviation because their average is here, but they have people that fall up out here, outside of their mean by a lot. Whereas my guild, which is all free to play, which just has like a bunch of people right here, is gonna have a very low standard deviation. So you match it based off of mean first, average, then you go off of standard deviation. This is not hard stuff to get, by the way. You can do simple math this and find it pretty easily. And then I think the third filter should be GLs. Try to match the number of GLs. Now, it's a matchmaker, so it's not going to be able to do this perfectly every time, but at least we can avoid situations where we're going 6 to 0. 0 to 2, fine, whatever. 0 to 1, great. 0 to 0, amazing. But 0 to 6, or even like 6 to 15, like these extreme examples where people have way more out GL'd, and I've had this happen in Territory Wars so many times on both the receiving and the offending end. It's just unfortunate, and it's unfair, I feel like, to the matchmaker and to everyone that's trying to participate. So those are the ways I think I would filter matchmaking: is average, standard deviation, number of GLs. Not hard to do. The matchmaker is just broken right now. So next, and this is going to be a controversial one, we'll actually hop back over to Paint, is I think it would be fun to have different numbers of teams in some of the different zones. So if you have your zones that you start with, let's call it 5 zones, and then each one of these branches off into some other zones, and so maybe these 2 go here, and these 2 go here, and this one has this kind of like own little zone, and then, I don't know, like this one comes to 2 more zones, and then this one can go over here, and to this one, and this can come here as well, and then if you get here, you can also go like this, I don't know. Anyways, you have like your map, right? And it's more complicated. It's got more of a web going to it. What if not every zone was just 5v5? Hear me out. I know people hate 3v3, but what if like this zone was 3v3, right? It's off on the side. You can still, remember, we talked about how these can go forwards and backwards. So you can still get to this zone by coming at it from the back if you get to this zone. But what if you had like a 3v3 zone somewhere and just 1 or 2 thrown in there from time to time, and just to spice things up a little bit? Then you kind of have this wrestle of like, how do I divide my 5v5 teams and make a couple of 3v3 teams as well? You can also open up the possibility for 3v3 Omicrons. I know people are probably not going to love that idea, but as somebody who likes the spice of 3v3, who likes trying to change things up every once in a while, I would like this. I would like to just have something a little bit different. Now, still, most of your zones are going to be 5v5. I don't want to change that. But I'm just saying throw 1 in there, throw 2 in there just to spice things up, make it a little more difficult to clear, and have it more variety on defense. Now, the other idea that I had on this, and people are really going to, I think, have maybe a small aneurysm about this, is what about a 6v6 zone? And what I mean by this is you take your 5, but your guild has some sort of guild bank where they contribute characters to pull in as allies. So on defense, what you would do is you would set your 5, and then another team member, another guildmate would come along and be able to place a 6th as an ally. And then for you, on going on attack, you would basically fill up in a separate kind of zone that's your bank, basically, where you can pull allies from. And so then when you go into this zone, you get to pull some of these allies and end up having 2 leaderships active. The same thing as when you go into a normal battle and you're able to pull an ally. I think this could add a lot of spice and variety to territory wars and make it something very unique that the game doesn't have elsewhere. Now, mixing that in with territory buffs, where certain planets or zones have buffs for certain characters, I think this just adds a lot of variety, makes it a lot less stale, and you just rotate this a lot. You don't keep it the same for too long, and you just make it so that way it's constantly changing every 3 months, every 4 months, whatever. So that way, we're not just dealing with the same territory war map that we've had since the dawn of time. Now, I know those last 2 ideas are probably a little more controversial. People might not love those, but I hope you guys at least see the vision here of improving territory wars. At least, can we change the map and can we change the matchmaker? I don't care if we don't get those 3v3 and 6v6 zones. That's fine by me. You don't need to spice it up that much, but I just wanted to throw a lot of ideas out here. CG, if you're listening, please, just let's do something about it. Not many people like this game mode right now as it is. It's extremely stale. Can we at least do just some small changes, some small quality of lives to improve this? If you guys agree with these, or if you have other ideas that you think would improve territory wars, just leave some comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys thought. If you disagree with me, please be respectful in the comments, and I would love to hear your respectful criticisms. But anyways, if you guys liked the video, like it, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care and peace.